like, yo, I'm sitting on this couch, but for real, I'm broken in this season. Like, I can say that safe here on this podcast, and you know, oh, the shit I have told you I've been through, this is probably the hardest season I've ever gone through publicly or in my life. Like, I'm really broken in this season. And for you to say that and notice that in me, I appreciate that so much, because that has been my prayer. I do not want my heart to change. I don't.
Hey guys, welcome to Little Black Bird 91. Listen, I wanted to break this video down in a completely different way. Simone is sharing her heart with us and letting us know that she is going for a breakdown. I wanted to explain what's actually happening here. There's two fronts here. There's a psychological and a spiritual. So if you're not Christian, you might not miss everything, but I'll try to explain it as best as possible. Simone's on her journey, trying to grow closer to God. And you're really trying to revolutionize the way she has a relationship with God, which she actually says earlier on in the video. But there's a second aspect that's actually happening to her. I believe that she's a dismissive avoidant individual, and I've kind of done a few videos around this. And with a dismissive avoidant attachment style, which is, there was an experiment done by John Bowlby, a British psychologist, many moons ago, if you want to call it that way. And what he was explaining was how we attach in relationships emotionally. And one thing I noticed about Simone was the avoidance to deal with her actual emotions. So if you're somebody who's always consistently avoiding your emotions, what actually is happening is you're suppressing and repressing how you actually feel. Now, there's actually a whole bag of consequences that come along with that, which I'm going to explain in the rest of the video. But I really do believe that her part of her breakdown is actually for her build-up. You know, when you go to God and you say you want to have a relationship with God, God goes, fantastic, let's have that relationship, but I want to be able to start working on your heart, because I want to bring you to a place where you're in transformation, you're in growth, and you're in healing. And so God has to start working within to bring outwardly. All right. And so his children, he chastises, but he also mends and heals and begins a process of just kind of uplifting you and enlightening you. And that's actually where the trouble starts, because the moment that he starts to shed light on your heart, you start to realize there's been a lot of things that you've been avoiding. And actually the breakdown is as a result of what you have avoided for a very long time. The very things that were helping you move along in life, the very things that you kind of helped you kind of get up and go, no longer suffice. Let me give an example. Your car that used to take diesel no longer takes diesel. Right? It's a completely shift. This is why the Bible talks about a transformation of becoming from the old man to the new man. What was making her tick in her old man self, in her old vehicle, was diesel. She's now got a new vehicle, and a new vehicle doesn't require diesel, it requires petrol. All right. And I don't know if that's the right thing. I don't drive, so you can tell. Right. But it requires something different. And so unfortunately, what's going to happen is when you start putting diesel in the car's going to be like, we don't do this here. Right? This is what causes the breakdown, because the realization that you can't go back to your old ways, and the realization you have to go forward, but you don't know what's ahead of you. And so there's a breakdown because there's needs for a transformation and a change where I'm like, I need to do something different. But what am I doing that's different? I don't know yet. Right? That's where God starts leading you, and you start realizing where you thought you had sight, you must walk in faith. Beforehand, you were walking in sight. You could see what you wanted. Now you have to walk in faith. That is according to what he wants. And that can be a little bit scary. But again, I want to go focus on the psychology of this aspect, because when you are a dismissive avoidant, right, you're having to unlearn some of the unhealthy habits that you have of self-reliance, hyper-independence, your inability to connect with people and trust them, right? Your core wound, which is that you feel that you're afraid of being rejected because you don't feel like you're worthy of love, which we're going to break down later on in the video again. And so when you're having to undo a lot of those thought processes and ideas, a breakdown is sure to occur. I'm in one right now, so I can tell you that for free. I'm in that same space, and it's a breakdown because you realize your worldview has to change. And when the pillars that were once supporting your ideas of how you thought about life begin to shake and to tremor and to break down, of course you're going to have a breakdown, because it's not what you saw life being. So we're going to get deeper. If this resonates with you, then listen, stick around, because I'm really going to break it all the way down for you and get you to a place where you fully understand what's actually happening in this video with Simone, okay? If you're new to the channel, make sure you like, share, subscribe. Click on that bell button for notification of uploads. We appreciate you guys. Stay locked and stay loaded. Let's get into the video because, baby, let me tell you something. Attachment styles ain't no joke. I want to play a little video for you guys about what attachment styles is, and then we're going to go deeper into the video for you guys. Okay, here we go. Let's play this video.
What is a dismissive avoidant attachment style?
So the dismissive avoidant attachment style in the Mary Ainsworth study, they showed very little distress when their primary caregiver left, kind of just kept playing by themselves. And then when the primary caregiver returned, they kind of acknowledged them, but they kind of also didn't run to them really. They just sort of kept doing their own thing. And oftentimes they might even be sort of indiscriminate in terms of their affection towards their primary caregiver versus maybe the stranger that was in the room during this experiment. And as adults, dismissive avoidant types tend to be highly independent. They're highly industrial, meaning that sometimes they're workaholics. And they don't love intense emotion. When somebody shows a lot of intense emotion, whether it's a partner or a friend, they tend to kind of go away from that a little bit. They kind of make an excuse to not get too involved. And generally, they are really comfortable being by themselves. And they
Now, you heard it there herself. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of those particular aspects work with what B. Simone has been going through. So let's break down this video from the dismissive avoidant perspective. Because one thing I have seen about B. Simone is when I described her and Megan's relationship being an anxious and her being more of a dismissive, how their relationship was actually working. But now she's in a space where she wants to date, but actually she's focused so much on her career and her purpose that she doesn't want to date. But really and truly what's actually happening is she's actually afraid of rejection. It's a core wound of a dismissive person. A dismissive avoidant person, their core wound, the thing that actually begins to emanate everything else is really that they're afraid of being rejected because they've been rejected already. In their childhood, they were emotionally neglected, oftentimes, right? And their emotions were shamed and told that they weren't available, they weren't allowed here. Your caregiver was unavailable emotionally, and so what ends up happening, you kind of repress and push away how you actually feel because you don't want to access that anymore because you've been shown that your emotions are not to be trusted and your emotions are not worthy around here anymore, right? This is where the trouble starts because you're repressing and suppressing. Well, eventually something suppresses, it's going to come out and it's going to explode, or what I call implode in another way. Let's listen to what she was kind of saying and breaking down a bit further on at this aspect, because she starts talking about positive validation, right? Okay, let's break it.
I mean, by 2019, I was like, hold on now. Y'all not really messing with me. You know, like that happened. And it was like the first time I felt not liked by the public. And it broke my heart. So it showed me like, the applause of man cannot be your standard.
Cannot.
Because it changed. People are so
Fickle,
fickle.
so fickle.
What? One day they like you, one day they love you, the next day they hate you. Like, I can't depend on that. I have to have an audience of one. I have to focus vertically. And if I'm making him happy and I'm being obedient to what he's telling me to do, I just have to be okay with what comes with that. So it does affect me. And I'm going through that now. And that's why I can speak on it because I'm speaking on it in real time. Once again, being vulnerable, being who I am in this season, it bothers me. And I have to get to the root of why I love positive validation from outside sources that don't matter.
People you don't even know.
Well, let me tell you why she feels the need to always want the validation of people who actually don't really matter, because they do matter. And the reason why they do matter is because she has not been validated as a child of her actual needs, right? See, when we talk about self-validation, right? People that grow up in secure attachment styles, okay, have been validated as a child. What does that mean? It means when the child comes to the parent or the caregiver will validate the child's feelings, will listen, will take care, will acknowledge their viewpoint and their worldview, and doesn't mean they have to agree, but they'll validate it. When you are a child of when you are a dismissive individual person, dismissive avoidant attachment style, what happens is when you take your cares and your burdens and your needs and your wants and your desires to your caregiver, they dismiss you. This is why it's dismissive avoidant. They dismiss you. They push you away, right? And they neglect your actual needs. And what you do is you learn that you cannot be validated in this way by your caregiver. And so what ends up happening is you look for ways to be able to be validated. So you might be career driven, you might be a movie star, a star or whatever, or a sports person, and you're so driven, but really and truly what's driving you, hence why I said the breakdown happens, is that you're looking for that validation. And so the applause of people is very important because the core wound of a dismissive avoidant is that they have been rejected. What happens when I clap for you is that I am now saying that you are now accepted. So if I withdraw my applause, I'm really saying again, we reject you once more. So being cancelled is going to be very painful for B. Simone because what the people are actually saying is we reject you just like you're rejected by your parents or whoever was your caregiver at the particular time when you had emotional needs. And because our work that she's involved in, she creates a persona, she's in comedy, everything we do involves emotions. right? So that feeling of being rejected is going to happen because the feeling of shame that comes up with having to not accept yourself, right? Because as a child, you were told that your emotions weren't important, your needs weren't important. What happens is that when you do discover that you have those feelings, is that shame as a feeling and disgust as an emotion begins to plague the dismissive individual, the dismissive avoidant person, and they end up rejecting themselves. Ooh, it's deep when you get there. Let's just take a minute of that. The shame, which is a feeling, and then the emotion of disgust, which makes us repel, we actually end up rejecting part of ourselves. Which part? The emotional aspect. So subconsciously, what's actually happening to B. Simone is the very part that she's rejected is the very thing that she's actually seeking validation from. So when they clap for her and when they accept her, so when they clap for her, it causes acceptance to begin to manifest for B. Simone. And she likes it because she's now being validated, which she never had as a child or didn't have enough of, right? So that's why it's very important. Yes, the validation for people. And so it will trigger her feeling this kind of breakdown feeling in this moment when she's not getting validated. Let's go to the next part of the clip, because I want to break down the next part, which is obviously why she's not actually dating. She breaks it down, and I think this is really powerful in terms of, again, learning about the wound of the dismissive avoidant.
Oh,
Nah.
we're friends.
Okay.
Didn't work out.
Okay. Why isn't B. Simone dating right now?
I think I'm not dating because whatever I put my mind to happens. Whatever I put my all into flourishes. And I just don't put my all into dating like I do into my purpose.
Why is that?
God, I don't know if it's a deeper rooted reason. I'm not sure. I haven't got there yet, but I think it's just my purpose fulfills me so much. I wake up in the morning and think about what I do.
But some people will say that the way you do one thing is the way
it's how you do everything.
So why don't you?
Maybe time. Maybe because
It's just
maybe
fear.
I
It's
put
just fear.
all my. Is it
It's just
okay?
fear.
Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I'll take
it's
that.
because when you
Now, one of the interesting things about this situation is why is she not dating? We heard her say about, she's so focused on her career, she's driven, she's just making sure that all she thinks about is just making sure that she just wins, right? And make sure she has the best job possible, which is actually a really interesting trait that dismissive avoidants tend to have, that they're hyper-focused on their work because, one, it is very easy to have a consequence to an action. It's very simple to understand, right? If I put effort in, I'm going to get an output. And so what ends up happening is a dismissive avoidant easily understands the equation. Remember, emotions are something that we actually avoid. And so what ends up happening is that an avoidant will throw themselves into work and career and achievement because that is an easy correlation to make. And actually there is an emotional reward from it, which is I feel like I've achieved something, I'm amazing, I'm great. But you'll realize that dismissive avoidant people can't even celebrate. They can't even fully celebrate themselves because, again, it involves what? Emotion. We don't have a very good relationship with dealing with our own emotions. And so really and truly within that space, the dating field is a very precarious area because what we're not dealing with is the aspect of fear. What do we fear as a dismissive avoidant is rejection. So when you go into dating field, there is a huge chance you may not be liked. There's a huge chance you may not be wanted. There's a huge chance you may not be desired. There's a huge chance that when you do get with somebody, they're like, actually, nah, that ain't for me. Or you get into a relationship for a year or two and the person's like, actually, this ain't for me. Or you realize it's not for you. And then you start feeling like within the relationship that there are some other things that are happening to you which are very difficult to actually explain. Let me give you one of those difficulties. One of the major difficulties for a dismissive avoidant is actually expressing their wants and their actual needs. What do I actually need from you? And so what can end up happening is the dating field becomes a minefield. Because if I don't express what I actually want and I actually need from you, then people don't meet those wants and needs. And guess what ends up happening? A self-fulfilling prophecy. The reason why I didn't want to get into dating is because I felt like people don't meet my emotional needs because my parents never did. And then I get into dating and my self-fulfilling prophecy is that I'm afraid of being rejected, right? Or being abandoned in a sense, right? Which is really the core wound of this. And so what ends up happening is I self-fulfill the prophecy because I don't know what my wants and needs are. So how the hell are they meant to know? So they don't fulfill my wants and needs. I end up withdrawing, or I end up, pushing you away, self-sabotaging, and then I complain about relationships not actually working for me because more than likely I either self-sabotage by not telling you my wants and needs, or I chose somebody who really wasn't worthy of my love and affections. But we're going to deal with that in another part, right? And so now what happens? I've actually rejected myself, and in doing so, you've rejected me. Oof. It's deep. Because I don't know my wants and needs, right? And I have a part of me which I feel disgust, which I said earlier on. I reject that emotional aspect of myself, the emotional connection that I need with myself. And in doing so, I'm not able to fully connect with you. In you doing so and not knowing my wants and needs, you're going to miss me. And in doing so, I'm going to feel rejected. And then I'm going to believe that actually nobody can meet my wants and needs. When in reality, I never met my own. I rejected me before you rejected me. It's painful. Very, very painful. And it's a very interesting paradox we can get into. And then within that space, also, we talk about co-regulation, right? Co-regulation is where we kind of... where we have a mutual interdependence on one another to be able to regulate our emotions. The dismissive person has been taught that you can't co-regulate here. Your parent never gave you the opportunity. They never taught you that. They told you have to deal with yourself. And so hyper independently, a dismissive avoidant doesn't want to co-regulate with a partner. This causes rejection for the other person too, because they can't get close to you because you won't, number one, emotionally connect, but you also won't co-regulate, and you don't tell me your wants and needs. But this is going to be problems, right? And so what ends up happening once more again is that you feel this sense of that someone might be too much to handle, they're too much, they're overbearing, their emotions are all over me, I need them to stop. You end up rejecting them, which in turn makes you feel like you're being rejected again because the relation doesn't last, right? And so you struggle to handle both yours and their feelings, right? The capacity of the dismissive avoidant is, I'm barely being able to maintain my own understanding of my emotions and my needs. And you want to add yours as well? This is going to cause you to do what? Reject. And this is all part of the reason why relationships don't do well with dismissive avoidance and all the other attachment styles which are insecure, which is a anxious and fearful avoidant. Okay, all right. So and one of the hardest things also within that space is that and you saw it with Megan Ashley. I think Megan Ashley, is it Megan and her relationship, which is it gets to a point where because you're so independent and you know how to deal with your own self when you're by yourself, when other people come in with their needs and their wants and they are not necessarily dealing with it in the way that you think they should deal with it in the terms of being solo and individual, and they want to necessarily co-regulate, it feels like they're being codependent, and it feels like they're doing too much, and it feels like they're encroaching on your territory and your boundaries. And one thing about dismissive avoidance is they don't know how to handle very good boundaries on the small things. When it comes to the big things, they're very good, but the small things, they struggle. All right. So she's afraid of dating because, number one, she doesn't fully understand the schematics of what happens in dating. She doesn't get it. She's been rejecting herself and in turn choosing people that are actually going to reject her in the long term. And so that's why there's a big fear behind it. And she doesn't really realize what's actually going on because she doesn't want to dig into the fear, because avoidance avoid the emotion. If she really looks at it, she'll look at it deeply. She'll see that she's inadequate. She'll feel like she's been inadequate. She'll feel like she's been worthless. She'll feel like she's not worthy. She'll feel like she's inferior, and she'll feel her self-worth being questioned, which she actually talks about later on, which we're going to go a little bit deeper into a second or two. But before we do, I want to let you guys know, listen, this is the kind of work that I do on a regular basis, okay? I have a 3-week waiting at the moment, as you can see below, about sign up to my coaching. I have a 3-week, thing now where clients are trying to sign in. It's 3 weeks wait, okay? Because the work that we're actually doing is we're getting to the root issue and cause. If you are going through something like this is the time to reach out to me, right? And I don't want it to get to a point where it's 2 years. I mean, I hope it does, because that means shows how great we're doing. But I don't want it for you. You know what I'm saying, Chu? So I want you to reach out to me if this is something you're going through. If it's a partner, whether it's you, whether it's a family member, and these some things that I'm mentioning are beginning to make sense. If you identify with Simone, this is a great time to reach out to me so we can start coaching you, because I want to bring transformation, growth, and healing. And we do that by tackling the root issues and the root causes. Look, I'm your favorite dating coach, you know what I'm saying to you, but we get deep around here, you know what I'm saying? All right, let's get to the next point. because I want to get to the next part of what she discussed, because there was a lot that she actually really broke down, which I think was really powerful. She said she wants to be an entrepreneur and freedom, and I will go through this real quick. I don't want to stay in too long in this area, but this was powerful as well.
So I think it's just like you said. Once again, I said this 2 years ago when we could talk about it. I said this in 1989, and y'all still bring it up. But I don't think it's 9 to 5. Yes, I could date a man with a 9 to 5. I could date an entrepreneur. I think it's freedom, and I think that's something that I desire for my family in a whole. Freedom, financial freedom, time freedom, just
Location
freedom.
freedom.
Freedom. We can work from anywhere. We can just move and be free, and I think that's what I desire.
You
Yeah.
gotta be a black man.
Now, as you heard her say here, she said she wants what we call freedom. She wants to be able to maneuver and, go where she wants to go. She wants freedom. And there's nothing wrong with that, actually, right? But we need to look at the core reason as to why this freedom is really kicking in. What is it that's actually happening to her? And taking it from a dismissive avoidant perspective, when I look at the way that we behave, the reason why freedom is a big thing is because there's a fear of commitment behind any action. So we can have a fear of commitment to work. We can have a fear of commitment to people. We can have a fear of commitment, in relationships, right? And oftentimes we think of commitment just romantically. But the reality is the dismissive avoidant doesn't want to be tied down. And here's why they don't want to be tied down. 2 things, okay? Number 1 is that the root fear of being controlled by that thing that they are committed to. If they feel that they have to be attached to that very thing, their fear is that they'll be controlled and micromanaged by that thing. I remember I used to have a fear, and I still kind of got it, of being a leader in church. Here's why. Not because of the leadership, but because I would have to be not held accountable, but I would have to be responsible. And that meant that, okay, what if I want to leave? What if I want to change this? What if I want to do this? And the thought process prevails, which is that I'm going to be controlled by this thing that I'm committed to. And it's going to hold too much power over me. And I've been there before. And I don't want to be there again. Because a lot of dismissive avoidants feel a sense of powerlessness. And so they're gaining their power by saying, I'm going to be free. So if she wants to date an entrepreneur or a person who can go here, there, and everywhere, yes, her job allows her to do so. But it's also about the fact that, again, I don't want to have to be restricted. Because that's what I felt as a kid. I was restricted. And so my partner can't be restricted, because then if they're restricted, then I'm restricted. And I don't want to be restricted. I don't want to be controlled. I don't want to be told and micromanaged by something that is outside of my control, because again, it was outside of our control that we were dismissed and neglected as children. So I'm not about to put myself in a position where I can be controlled by something like this, even though we're always controlled by something. That's number 1, fear of being controlled and micromanaged. But then there's number 2, okay, which is a fear of commitment due to boundary issues. Ooh, now this is even deeper. Because the fear behind the boundary issues is that dismissive avoidants don't put up good boundaries because they are dismissive avoidants. They avoid putting up the boundaries. Why? Because they fear that other people will feel like they're being rejected. See, we got a bad rep, dismissive avoidance. They bad rep that they don't show empathy, but we actually do, and that's actually one of our biggest problems. The biggest problem is that you fear that the other party will feel a sense of rejection when I put up a boundary. And I'm not talking about big ones. I'm talking about small ones. So let's say like you annoy me today. I won't say it today, but on the 4th occasion, I've been like, I've cut you oblige on 4 occasions. You don't know that, but I know that. I've been pissed off on 4 occasions, but I've not said nothing. On this time, I'm going to cuss out your clerk. Now you're asking me, why am I reacting the way I'm reacting? Well, because and it really and truly what's actually happened is I avoided dealing with the situation at that point in time because I didn't want you to feel rejected. But now I feel like you're taking a piss. Yeah, I think you're taking a mick. And so because of that, I've got to now let you know in a way that mismatches the actual the situation, my anger, my frustration. But in reality, it's because I don't set very good boundaries on the small things. I don't feel justified in doing that. I don't feel I have the worth to actually set a boundary on the little things, because then you might not like me. Ooh! Because I'm afraid of being rejected. And so I don't set boundaries on the little things because I'm afraid you might not like me because I'm going to be maybe too strict, apparently, or I might be doing too much. And so I don't set it so you can like me because I'm afraid of being rejected. Isn't that a crazy place to be? So you avoid setting those boundaries. And what ends up happening, okay, within that space is you want freedom. Why? Because I don't want to have to set a boundary and then maybe I want to change my mind. And here's another part, which is point number 3, is I'm afraid of your emotional response. If I set a boundary, I'm afraid that your emotional response is going to pee me off. I'm going to feel like you're manipulating me, and then I'm going to get angry at the fact that I allowed you to put me in a space where I feel like you're manipulating me, right? You know, and so what ends up happening is I'd rather just avoid the whole situation in general, right? Let me be free. Oof, it's deep. It's deep, y'all. I'm telling you. Okay, we're going to deal with the self-worth issues because that's what she spoke about, right? This is also powerful. I want you to hear this. It's really important.
I chose the wrong man, but like I was a liar. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like things like that.
Something in you, your trauma is attracting that man.
What are some things in you that you notice that were one of those things?
I don't think I ever lacked self-love. Love is patient, love is kind, love is, I'm all those things to myself. I lack self-worth.
You lack self-worth.
Yeah. I don't
And
know
how does that
what-
show up though?
When you know your worth, you don't put yourself in certain situations. You don't brush things under the rug. You speak up for yourself. You're bold. You're confident. A non-negotiable is not negotiable when it happens. Yeah, I'm learning my self-worth now. I think I always had self-love. I love myself. But knowing your worth, you just don't deal with certain things. If you're a precious jewel, you're not allowing certain things. Oh, I allow so much from men and friendships.
You feel like you were allowed.
And that's a really important part, right? She said she feels like she allows a lot of things, right? And the reason being is because, again, her self-worth, right? And I'll explain what self-worth is in a second. But that's actually where your anger is going to be hitting. I'm going to tell you about your hidden anger, the anger that comes out from a disappointment of other people's behaviors and your silent expectations that you never told nobody, but you expected them to meet because you never met them in your childhood, or where you become so super independent because you are afraid of putting your expectations and needs on somebody. And then actually what really happens is confirmational bias. You do put your needs on somebody. You finally trust somebody. You finally open up to somebody. And guess what ends up happening? They end up doing the very thing that you believe that would end up doing, which is letting you down. And so self-worth in its essence is our ability to see our own value to humankind, and our ability to see our worth and our worthiness of being loved. Our ability to see our worthiness of being loved. Now, why is this really important? Because I don't know why the song Rihanna came to my head. You want to say? But anyway, because what ends up happening is when you don't know your worth, you put yourself in situations that are not worthy of you. You undersell yourself because you don't know what you're worth. Let me give you an example. If I ask you to come to a show and I say I'm headlining the show, but here is my actual price packet for you saying you want me on your show. I say it's £5,000 maybe. And you tell me, no, you're worth 1,000. Now, if I don't believe that I'm worth 5,000, I'm going to settle for 1,000. Because I don't know my actual worth. And so what ends up happening is I'm going to go to that event and more than likely I'm going to be pissed off. Because I realized that I short-circuited and sold myself short. And more than likely, there are going to be things that happened or things that are happening in that space that are going to really tick me off, that are going to make me realize that actually this wasn't my worth. But until I actually realize what my actual worth is, I will keep putting myself in situations that undersell me. One of them being love. And so the reason why she's not dating is because she doesn't actually fully know her actual worth. And so she keeps meeting men that are absolutely crud, rubbish, but, are absolutely men that she should not be dealing with, because in reality, she's worth much more. Okay, now your sense of self-worth is impacted by, your relationship history, your social status, your finances, your health, and there's so much more that can impact your self-worth. But in reality, your self-worth is really impacted, and I mean on a longevity status, by your childhood. Remember, and we're going to get to this on the next part, is that she says actually her father didn't really protect her. And so in that failure to protect her, there's going to be a denting and a hit on her actual self-worth and how she sees herself in what she's actually worth. And so what's going to happen is that in your relationships, okay, you will choose people that you're fighting to prove your worth for. You will choose your relationships where you're having to do something to show to them that you're worthy and that you deserve to be liked and wanted. And you're going to persistently be in a place of trying to be, and I'm sure that beats most of this person as well. The bigger one is this. You end up playing Superman. You end up trying to be a savior for other people because you want to heal them so they can see your worth. Ooh. You end up being in scenarios where you end up trying to save people Because you're saying, I can see your worth. I can see your brokenness because I see my own. I can see your brokenness. And if I just save you and heal you, you'll see mine. It's subconsciously working. Man, that's crazy. It's deep. Very, very deep. You know? It's painful to be. Okay.
A lot, like even as a child, like
Oh
in the
my
way
God.
that you felt.
Yeah.
Right? The way that your parents would speak to you. Did your parents speak life into you when you were growing up?
Well, this is a good question. Let me, I love you, daddy. Just like, bitch. I wasn't protected as a child. So I think that's where a lot of my comedy comes from. I walk on eggshells a lot, trying to people please, and I have a lack of boundaries because I want you to like me, because I need validation from other people instead of getting it internally. I wasn't protected. So I feel like I did a lot to make adults happy around me that were supposed to be there to protect me, but really didn't make me feel comfortable as a child.
I know you said you grew up in the church.
Man, that point cannot be missed at how important that point is about the lack of protection in her childhood, the lack of covering, the lack of support and maybe input she might have even had that she actually necessarily needed. And so in that space, because she didn't get that protection, she had to protect herself. Okay, and so that then breeds this hyper independence. That breeds, when you become so hyper independent and you have to defend yourself and support yourself. What ends up happening is emotions go by the wayside, because why am I dealing with emotions? They are irrelevant right now. They do not produce results. What we don't realize is emotions are messages to us. The emotions are a part of the results. They're needed. But we don't realize that at the point in time of survival. It's when we get to a place of thriving, which is why Simone is breaking down. When you get to a place of now thriving, you have to start dealing with the root issues and causes and the emotions that you've been suppressing for how many years. So the lack of protection is really important. As a child, she's been walking on eggshells. She wanted to be liked by other people. She was doing things to be wanted and desired. And that's going to permeate into her relationships, where she's going to do things to be wanted, liked, and desired. And when you do that, when you have that air of desperation, you meet people that are willing to meet your desperation. You meet people that are willing to take advantage of you. You meet people that are willing to give you less than what you actually desire. They're willing to breadcrumb you because you are so desperate, so hungry, and so thirsty, you'll take whatever comes your way. The Bible says to the hungry man, everything bitter tastes sweet. And so because of her failing with her parents, at least to protect her from her perspective, unfortunately, that child now has a wound. Okay? Not protected in her home. Okay? Now, this is going to lead to something else, which is really powerful, and I want to play this part, and we're almost close and coming to an end again as well. And once more again, I want to let you guys know, listen, this is what we're doing as coaching. This is why I want to make sure that you guys are aware. This is the kind of stuff we are sorting out in coaching. If you're going through this, reach out to me. Don't suffer alone. This is the greatest time to reach out to me. We're going to deal with root issues. I want growth, transformation, and healing. And I tell my clients all the time, if you don't see change in 3 sessions, you should fire me. Yeah, fire me, because I guarantee it that you're gonna get results before the end of the free episodes, right? And the free sessions, right? Whether you got a therapist or not, because we're gonna touch on real issues and start moving you. We have to, right? Growth, transformation, and healing has to take place. So reach out to me. There's a description and our links in the description box. I know it's a bit of a 3-week waiting list. We're not charging a specific fee. Okay, so listen, there's no specific fee. It's whatever you feel the sessions is worth, or whatever's in your hand. If you haven't got enough, that's fine. Just reach out to me. I want to help as many people in this season as I can. Okay, let's go into our next one, and let's break this down.
I'm really not. I don't feel as big or as as this big entity as I really am. You know what I'm saying?
I do that a lot. Like, I don't want people I think that goes back to not wanting people to think like I'm a bitch, or I think I'm better, or you're not on my level. So let me shrink myself to make you feel okay, so you like me. It goes back to wanting to be validated.
Are you in a space right?
And that's a really important part, because she said it goes back to a space of wanting to be validated. And the reality of the situation is no child can validate themselves. There's no such thing. No human being validates themselves from birth. You are validated by your parents and what they input into you, because we are socialistic human beings. And so the validation comes through human interaction and social relationships. We are designated and we're designed to need those relationships. It's not good for man to be alone. And so the shrinking is because not wanting to be rejected, to not look like a B word, as she said. It's because actually, what does a B word mean? It means that people are now rejecting you. If the B word had a positivity to it, which was you're being accepted, you wouldn't mind. But you mind because it means you're being rejected by people. And you want to be liked and you want to be validated, and this causes an unease in you. Okay, so she has a persona that's not the person, and the persona protects the person. Her bright, vivacious energy of, baby, when she does all her stuff, right, creates this barrier that kind of hopefully stops some of the penetration of the arrows that are coming your way of rejection. But it doesn't stop every single arrow, because at the end of the day, her persona is her. It's a person. Her persona emanates from her person. She's not playing a character. She's playing herself in an extended form. And so, unfortunately, the rejection that she might receive from the audience will be absolutely hitting her. And so the shrinking of her is more of a case of, I don't want to take up too much space because I don't want anyone to reject me. I don't want to take up too much space. I don't want anyone to say anything bad about me. I don't want to take up too much space. I don't want anyone to dislike me, because that will be a form of what? Rejection. Okay, rejection. All right. Now I'm going to drop a part 2 of this because there's more that we want to discuss, but I don't want to go deeper yet. I've got 35 minutes on the clock. Let's leave it there. We're going to do a part 2. I'll drop it tomorrow. I want you to understand that, listen, if you're dismissive avoidant, do not allow yourself to settle in this place. It is very real. Dismissive avoidants tend to avoid the emotional connections with people, and they tend to fear that connection with people because really and truly, it makes them feel weak and vulnerable having to share themselves. And I want you to understand that this is fixable, but we've got to work on the root cause and the root issues. All right. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, click on that bell button. We're going to do part 2, and then part 3 will deal with the godly aspect and what's actually happening as well. Much appreciation. Stay locked, stay loaded. We'll see you again very, very soon.